I think that's not enough water.
Well, we'll see if I can make it good, and if I do, you'll see me running to that every about 20 minutes. Great, well, Margaret. Trying.
Drinks water. I'm gonna pass it off. When she went to work for the DA's office,
I expect her to give a highlights for
they
you.
got drug tests.
Yes.
They don't show you the other stuff, it says 2 a.m.
Yeah, all day long, yeah.
Perfect. That's what matters.
So,
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, I can imagine, this is a lot of water. Yes.
Dan, just so you know, the things that are highlighted on that are ones that need a roll call vote.
But they all need roll call votes.
But we're gonna have to bring back,
So-
Yes.
we have to find it.
Just FYI.
Yeah,
I didn't know if that got explained.
I got that, Margaret.
Cool.
Water.
Well, if you drink that whole thing, if I say, does anybody need a break? I know
Yes.
it's good.
As I said, if you see me sneaking out, I apologize in advance.
Yeah,
Are we live?
not yet.
It's like a month. It was for me, but I'm trying to be better. My office got me this
If you're gonna be
Christmas,
gone for
so-
Okay. Oh,
So if those are lit, then
What'd you
you see
say?
the light over here.
perfect.
When they're off,
Perfect.
Oh, one of those tests.
One
of those
Okay,
tests.
yeah, I've done those tests.
I can do that. You never know when it's gonna be. Yeah. Okay, and just hit the sound. Yep,
just set the sound.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
There's a 7. I have that Dave, our DA,
Have fun.
same thing. He's giving me his phone number 7 times.
All right.
Oh, hold on, you're still.
I keep forgetting to put it in, so.
No, you're good.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We'll call to order the regular meeting, January 20th regular meeting of the Trinity County Board of January 20th, January 18th. I'm thinking ahead. Regular meeting of the Trinity County Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Grove, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, public comment period. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. Do we have any public comment?
I see none in the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment and move on to item 1.1, presentations, or presentations 1.1. Receive a presentation from Tom Stokely regarding the California Department of Water Resources Sites Reservoir Project. No fiscal impact.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. I'm Tom Stokely of Mount Shasta. I'm with Save California Salmon. I'm also on the board of directors of the California Water Impact Network. I'm a former 27-year resident of Trinity County with 23 years in your planning department, working mostly on the Trinity River. I retired in 2008. The Sites Reservoir Project is a proposed project by a group called the Sites Project Authority. The proposed reservoir would be 1.5 million acre feet. It's a so-called off-stream reservoir. It's in a valley in the western Sacramento Valley west of Maxwell. And there is currently a revised draft EIR supplemental environmental impact statement issued with the deadline for comments on January 28th. And the lead agencies are the Sites Project Authority under CEQA and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation as the NEPA lead agencies, not the California Department of Water Resources as stated in your agenda. There was a previous draft EIS-EIR in 2017, but the project changed and there were some problems with that draft. So again, the deadline is January 28th. Your Fish and Game Advisory Commission has expressed some concerns. I'm just going to talk to you about the Trinity River and sites because that's really your bailiwick and I don't want to get you lost in all the details on the Sacramento River. The previous draft EIS-EIR did have some impacts to the Trinity River. The modeling they did for it moved around some of the exports out of the basin to essentially earlier in the year and some of the drier years, and then reducing exports in the fall. We believe that would have had some negative temperature impacts on the fisheries because water heats up in Lewiston Reservoir in the summer and fall. And those warmer temperatures, even though Trinity Lake water is very cold, by the time it comes out of Lewiston Dam, there's not a lot of water being moved to the Sacramento River. It heats up. It's kind of one of the strange things about the Trinity River. In order to keep it cold for the fish, you have to move water to the Sacramento River. Now, the current version, they claim there's no impacts to the Trinity River, and in fact, we had our modeler look at the modeling, and he did not find any changes in the pattern of exports, river releases, or storage to the Trinity River. Although there is no operating plan, so we really don't know exactly how it would impact the Trinity River. But let me say that the Trinity River and its fisheries are at a disadvantage in terms of the regulatory scenario. The Sacramento River winter run Chinook is listed as endangered as opposed to the Trinity River's coho, which are only threatened, and the spring Chinook, which are only threatened under state law. Also, the Trinity River does not have temperature protection incorporated excuse me, into the Bureau of Reclamation's state water rights to protect it from taking too much water out of Trinity Lake. And until the Bureau of Reclamation's water permits, their state water permits, even though it's a federal agency, until those permits are updated, impacts to the Trinity River can and will occur in terms of low storage in Trinity Lake and warmer temperatures at key life stages of the fish, such as holding spring Chinook or spawning fall and spring Chinook. Now, the Sites Project Authority claims it has no authority to change Trinity River operations, which is actually true. However, Sites Reservoir will be owned not only by the Sites Project Authority, but by a number of member agencies, and one of those member agencies that'll own something like 8% of sites is the Bureau of Reclamation. And obviously, they have full control of Trinity, and they would have the ability, as far as we know, to move Trinity water from Trinity Lake and park it in sites, thereby drawing down the Trinity River, or possibly changing the pattern of exports, which is what we saw in the 2017 draft EIS-EIR. So the real question is, how can the Sites Project Authority be held responsible for the Bureau of Reclamation's actions related to operation of sites? In reality, they probably can't, but there is a way to ensure that the Trinity River is not harmed by the Bureau's partial ownership of sites, and that is through the amendment of the Bureau of Reclamation's Trinity River water permits. Again, these are state water permits issued by the State Water Board in 1959. I believe there are 8 of them for the Bureau's storage and diversion of Trinity River water. The legislative and legal history of the Trinity Division is full of requirements to do no harm to the Trinity River, and I think the Sites Reservoir clarifies the need to have the Bureau's water permits amended. So what constitutes harm to the Trinity River? If we look at something called the Water Quality Control Plan for the North Coast region, that's at the bottom of page 3 of that document I gave you. It's put out by the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, and it basically contains all of the water quality objectives for various water quality parameters throughout the North Coast region, which is from the Oregon border down to Santa Rosa and includes the Trinity and Klamath River. So we have 3 basin plan temperature objectives. One is 60 degrees, July 1st to September 15th at the Douglas City Bridge. That's to protect holding spring Chinook salmon, which used to go upstream of Lewiston and Trinity dams, but can no longer do that. Those fish are again listed as threatened under the State Endangered Species Act. Then it changes to 56 degrees at the Douglas City Bridge on September 15th to October 1st, and that's to protect spawning spring Chinook in that reach of the river. And then it goes to 56 degrees October 1st to December 31st from Lewiston to the North Fork confluence, and that's to protect the fall Chinook that are spawning. I might add that the 56-degree objective has been found more recently to be inadequate to protect spawning fish, but I won't go into that. At any rate, the State Water Board in 1989 made a decision. These temperature objectives, there's similar ones for the Sacramento River, and in the late 80s, the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board issued something called waste discharge requirements, and that's basically regulating temperature discharges from Shasta Dam through a water quality permit. And there was a big hubbub about it because people did not like temperature being classified as a waste under the Clean Water Act. So in 1989, the State Water Board directed that the water waste discharge requirements that had been issued by the Central Valley Regional Board be rescinded, and that the state board itself would hold a water right hearing, which ultimately resulted in Water Right Order 9005. And as part of those proceedings, Trinity County participated in them, concerned that protections for Sacramento salmon might harm the Trinity River. And as a result, the state board made a finding in their 1989 Water Quality Order 8918 that the state board should conduct water right proceedings to consider whether the Bureau's permits should be modified to establish temperature limitations or other conditions to ensure adequate water quality for protection of the Trinity River fishery. Then they held a water right hearing 90-5 in 1990, which the county again participated in. And again, the state board announced in there their intention to conduct a Trinity-specific water right hearing. They did not feel they could do it as part of Water Right Order 9005. However, in that water right order, there were some limited protections for the Trinity River. And essentially, the state board said the Bureau of Reclamation shall not move water to the Sacramento River for temperature control in a manner that would harm the Trinity River. And harm was defined by the two 56-degree temperature objectives that are in the Basin Plan. The Basin Plan actually hadn't been adopted by then, so the 60-degree objective at Douglas City from July 1st to September 15th was not part of that. But that's only for temperature control on the Sacramento River, for moving water. It's not for all other CVP project purposes, such as power, water supply, or possibly filling Site's reservoir. So the Site's reservoir basically points out the vulnerability of the Trinity River and the fact that other than moving water for temperature control to the Sacramento River, the Trinity River's Basin Plan temperature objectives are not fully implemented for all project purposes. The Bureau of Reclamation has very clearly stated that they don't believe they need to comply with the 60-degree temperature objective to protect spring Chinook. And so the only way that the Trinity River can truly be protected from Site's reservoir is that the state board would follow through with the promise they made in 1989 to hold a Trinity River specific temperature water right hearing to consider amending the Bureau of Reclamation's water permits for the Trinity River. This might be an opportunity to get things such as a minimum pool in Trinity Lake to make sure that we don't run out of water for fish, people, recreation, and power during dry years. We are potentially looking at a year like that this year. So I know that you have a lot on your plate, and I know that you don't have full water resources staff up and running, although I do understand you have a new person. But I would advise, if you have the opportunity, to comment on the Site's draft EIS-EIR before the deadline. And if not, I consider this a good opportunity to educate you about some of the history of the Trinity River and why the Trinity River is still very vulnerable. I might add, there is a minimum pool requirement in the 2000 National Marine Fisheries Service biological opinion for the Trinity Record of Decision, but it's only a 600,000 acre-foot minimum pool, and at that point you pretty much lost control of cold water temperatures in the river, and certainly studies indicate that storage levels at about 750,000 acre-feet, which is pretty close to what we are right now, is really the minimum you should take it in any year to maintain adequate temperatures. So I thank you for your time. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them, and thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Stokely?
Yeah, Tom, this is Keith. Thank you for that presentation. How does the rod play into the temperature controls?
Well, it was considered in the environmental document as a standard that needed to be met, and so the various alternatives that were considered prior to adoption of the rod went through a vetting process where it was determined which alternatives best met those basin plan temperature objectives, and the record of decision was the one that met those objectives the best. It actually met the objectives better than the alternative that would have put all the water down the river but left Lewiston Dam in place. So the rod, I guess, provides water to ensure that the basin plan temperature objectives are met, assuming that the summer flows remain around 450 CFS. Although I might add, with the hotter summers we've been having lately, those temperature objectives are getting more and more difficult to meet, even without low storage in the lake. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Secondly, so you're saying that the water right is now 62 years old. When does that naturally expire?
I believe it expired, really good question, Keith. I believe it expired in 2009. The Bureau of Reclamation asked for a time extension. Same with the Department of Water Resources, water rights. For the state water project, we're talking dozens of water rights for both agencies, for rivers all over the state. And I believe they both expired in 2009 without any action by the state board. I'm not really sure legally where it stands, but clearly the 1959 water permits for the Trinity River are very outdated. The minimum in-stream flow in there is 120,500 acre-feet a year, whereas the rod flows are a weighted average annual of 595,000 acre-feet. The difference between that 595 and 120 is considered abandoned water under the water code. Theoretically, somebody could appropriate it, but I don't know who's going to pick up 400,000 acre-feet between Lewiston Dam and the Klamath River.
Oh, well, you just gave me an idea.
Yeah, build a mega city, huh? Giant pot farms. Maybe you already have that.
So, in general, is your group for the sites? I know you have other issues, and I'll just throw my little thought in here. Having more water storage can only help California in the long run and take pressure off of other places. But is your group against sites in general, or just you're worried about this Trinity County issue?
No, there are a number of other issues identified. I think the biggest one is the minimum in-stream flow, or the so-called bypass flow on the Sacramento River. In some months, they take it as low as 5,000 cubic feet per second at Wilkins Slough. You still have a lot of downstream users. You still have the delta downstream. And so the concern is that they're actually not taking surplus water. I don't think anybody can argue about diverting water out of the Sacramento River when they're blowing 90,000 cubic feet per second out of Shasta Dam, but it's when they divert during the drier years or the lower flow periods that are of concern. And so at this point, my organization and many others are opposed to sites Reservoir because we don't believe it's just taking surplus water. And I guess from the sites authority perspective, if they had a larger minimum bypass flow for some of those months when it's critical, the project might not be cost effective. Again, it looks good on the surface, but there are some other issues. It may also inundate, for instance, cinnabar tailings and mobilize methyl mercury and other heavy metals. They're also going to discharge through the Colusa Basin drain, which is one of the most heavily polluted areas in the Sacramento Valley. So the devil's in the details, but I certainly understand the desire for more storage, but we don't think this is being properly carried out.
All right, thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Keith. Always good questions.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, and I don't know if it's necessarily straight to you, Tom, how this interacts with the TMC, and if Trinity County has other water questions or water issues they want to discuss or approach BOR or whoever, does that always have to go through the TMC, or is Trinity County able to have, and maybe it's more a question for you, Keith, but that's kind of my, what I'm wondering about is how the TMC integrates to the process of us looking at this and other future water issues.
No, we do not have to take everything through the TMC. We now have seen the Hupa tribe go around the TMC to stop things that go on the river that they voted no. So the TMC really is only representing the 40 miles and the river restoration itself, which is a very narrow issue. So the county, and I've long hoped that we had a natural resources division, water, like we used to, which Tom took part of, that we can look over all of Trinity County's water needs. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's no limitation on who can comment on these kind of environmental documents. They're open to the full public to review and comment on. And certainly, as Keith had indicated, some members of the TMC have gone around the TMC to get what they want. And all I can say, Keith, is that's been going on for a very long time, since even before the rod.
And then is the Fish and Game Commission planning on making comments on this and submitting comments? Is our Fish and Game?
No, we haven't talked about it yet.
Okay.
I think we'll bring that up at the next meeting.
We talked about it at the last meeting.
You have 10 days to comment.
Do we make comments on
I don't know if they've submitted, but they wanted to.
it? Okay. All right. Sam,
I said,
did we put something together though?
we did, we drafted a letter.
There was a letter drafted by the Fish and Game Advisory Commission.
So Tom, I have one question here. I know you didn't want to go into this, but the 60-degree water temperature objectives in Douglas City, if we don't meet those, and it seems to be that we haven't been meeting them lately. In fact, I don't even think there was a gauge in Douglas City last year. How does that affect the rest of the river, knowing that the river warms in the summer as it goes downstream? If we continue to exceed the 60% or 60-degree temperature objective?
Well, I think it probably depends on the size of the spring run. If it's a smaller run and they can get closer to Lewiston Dam, it's probably going to be pretty cold up there. But if we would ever get back to the good old days when you'd float down the river and you'd go through Limekiln Gulch and the water would just be splashing with spring Chinook everywhere, I think what we could see is a greater pre-spawn mortality of those spring Chinook and also reduced egg vitality. The 60 degrees is intended to keep the fish alive and also to keep the eggs viable inside the salmon. So by not meeting that, you certainly jeopardize the success of the spring run.
So with that being said, would we be looking at pulse flows more consistently than we have been if we don't meet this temperature objective in July, August, we'll say, downstream for cooling the water and reducing the chance of ick in the fish? I know it's
yeah, I would suppose it would increase that, although that what you're referring to is what's called the Lower Klamath Record of Decision. It was adopted by the Bureau of Reclamation in 2017, and it calls for these pulse flows throughout the summer months when the incidence of ick and columnaris increase in the fish. But that is a separate process, and that is a federal process, and that's based on flows, temperatures, and also the extent of disease found in the fish that they trap on the river. But certainly, the warmer the water is upstream, I would think the more likely it would be that there's going to be disease problems further downstream.
Thank you, Tom.
Any other questions?
Well, I just kind of want a conclusion on is the Fish and Game Commission sending a letter on the sites? And if so, is the board going to have a chance to see that? Can the board get a copy of it? Or does the board want to draft their own letter separately?
Council, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Fish and Game Commission really advises to us. And so I don't know if they have the authority to send without our approval. But I was on there a very short period, so I'm not an expert on the Fish and Game.
I believe the letter that the Fish and Game Advisory Commission has drafted is the one included in the backup.
Oh, it is in the backup.
And it was most directed at the board, from my understanding.
And I think the other letters we've done before have all been directed at the board to be sent up, say, higher spots.
I'm sorry, I didn't know the second was
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So there's a question kind of put up in the letter. We recommend that the Board of Supervisors request either an environmental effect analysis for the project, which specifically addresses impacts to the Trinity River habitat conditions and their associated biotic communities, or a water rights hearing for the Trinity River by the Bureau of Reclamation, which it seems like was already due and requested and promised for 30 years ago, I guess.
10 years ago.
10 years ago?
33 years ago.
Okay.
It was promised in 1989.
So,
But the water rights were done 10 years ago.
That's true.
so it seems like there's obviously some legal stuff that we'll have to look into. I have no objections to this. I mean, yeah, as Evan stated, this letter is to us, the board. It's not drafted for the site's comments. Was there any desire for the board to write their own comments for the sites?
I would say I'm not objecting to it. I think this is a lot more complex question than what we can do in a half an hour meeting. But if I would support a letter that was general, that said, you know, to study the Trinity County water effects or temperature, you know, something more general than getting into a bunch of specifics that we're really not, from our standpoint. I know Tom is an expert in this, but from our standpoint, I think more of a general letter asking for more study would be appropriate.
Asking the site's entity to take, okay.
So Keith, is this draft from the Fish and Game Committee, is this good enough for kind of a startup? I think that's kind of the way we... Sam, step on up.
So I have another point of order question. Since this was a presentation, normally we don't take public, but since we're asking to do an action, should we then take public?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, I'm still trying to read the supporting documentation, but I guess we will open this up to public comment. Is there any?
I have one more question for you.
Okay. Go ahead, Supervisor Cox.
Tom, this is Jill Cox. This paragraph here says that they recommend that the board request this environmental effect analysis. But you're saying that this public comment period closes on the 28th. Is asking for analysis sufficient?
Well, the thing of it is, they've already done an analysis and they've shown no impacts to the Trinity River. That's because they did not highlight or anticipate any potential changes by the Bureau of Reclamation. You know, something more simple might be to just request that they have a condition on there that sites project not be operated in a manner that would violate the North Coast Basin Plan temperature objectives. That keeps it real simple. It doesn't get into water rights. If you ask them to analyze the Trinity River, they're going to say they already did. So what I would say if I were you, to keep it simple, is the Bureau of Reclamation is going to own a percentage of this. We're concerned about their operations that might negatively impact the Trinity River. So we ask that you condition the project to ensure that it is not operated in a manner by the Sites Project Authority or any of its members in a way that would violate the Basin Plan temperature objectives. Keeps it pretty simple. It certainly is very complex, as Supervisor Groves indicated. There's a lot of history here.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any public comment?
Go for it.
Hello, I'm Samantha Chilgoat. I'm actually the Vice Chair of the Trinity County Fish and Game Advisory Commission, so I can help resolve some of these questions for you today. The letter from us was a recommendation to yourself, the Board of Supervisors, to comment on this project, and simply to say we recognize the legal issues with the water rights, so that's why we made it an or thing, where you could simply say that the analysis as it currently stands was not adequate in addressing the Trinity County interests in it. So. And we did vote on it as a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors at the last meeting.
Okay, so who's going to take the lead on drafting that before the 10-day period is up?
Can we finish public comment, please? Sorry.
Do we have?
I have more public comments on Zoom.
Okay.
Veronica Kelly Albies.
Good morning, Veronica Kelly Albies, Douglas City. I will admit this is not my area of expertise, and my go-to river and fish guy is already sitting up there. So I do put my trust in Liam in taking a look at all of this. I've sat and listened to him talk about the river on many occasions. I would say, I think, as a member of the public, if there is something additional, I expected this as a presentation, and I enjoyed listening to it to learn more about it since I do live on the river. But there was nothing attached. There was no letter or anything. So I guess as a member of the public, I'm taken aback with that there's going to be some kind of action or there's a letter. I would have liked to be able to read that, but I put my faith in my river guys on the Board of Supervisors and just say, protect our river, protect our fish. I would like to catch some, but they never seem to get on my line. So I've got to go see Liam for that. But thank you very much.
Thank you. So the letter is attached to the board, the agenda packet. It's under item 1.1. There's an attachment for that letter from the Trinity County Fish and Game Commission if you're interested in reading it.
I've got it up here. It wasn't coming up for me. I will try again. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment on Zoom?
I have no more raised hands and no new chats, and it looks like we're good in the room.
Okay.
So I have a question for Sam. Are we good with adding Tom's final comments there to our letter?
Yeah, the phrasing that he came up, I think that is fine to do. I would think that there are probably other concerns potentially outside of temperature, but for the interest in simplicity, I think that's great.
And time.
For this partnership.
So, as a Board of Supervisors, I would kind of have to lean a little bit on council here. How would we move forward if we want to draft a letter or send this letter? Because this item was agendized as a presentation, how do we move forward?
So there's two ways you can move forward. The first is you can give direction to staff to prepare it and have the chair sign it. In that case, it will not come back to the board, and the board will have to accept whatever the chair signs as a representative of the board. If the board would like to review it, it should be re-agendized and brought back to the board for consideration. I know we have a 10-day deadline, so it have to be done in a special meeting. So those are the two options.
Okay, so after listening to that, how would the board like to proceed with this?
So after listening to Tom's final comments, in addition to what we have here in this letter, does anybody have any negative comments towards that, I would guess? I would leave the question.
I support either the request for further analysis, and I also support adding the condition that references the North Coast Regional Basin Plan Temperature Objectives, because that is a legal document that we can reference that states kind of what the issues being raised as the concern, in my opinion. So if that wording with the North Coast Regional Basin Plan is in the letter, I think that really outlines a legal backing detail to it.
I would agree with that. And sorry, Sam, I thought this was what we were going to go through today, adding Tom's stuff to it, so I didn't want to make it seem like we didn't talk about it the other night. But I knew Tom might have a little something to throw at it, so I think with his verbiage in there, I think our letter would be pretty complete, and if the board agrees on it, we could just send it up that way. Does that sound good to all?
Supervisor Groves? Yeah.
Well, I just, from my point of view, I want to make it clear that the board as a whole is not against the site project, that we want to stay focused on temperature control in the basin. But I do, we're going to have to appoint somebody to write this letter and move forward, so I think that's our basic move that we're going to have to do, and I don't know. I'm not volunteering, but Jeremy sounds like he is.
Oh, I'm not volunteering, I was looking at Margaret.
Okay, then Liam sounds like he is, I don't know. But
that would be the first question would be, how do we want to address drafting a letter if we want to have one of the supervisors draft the letter? And the second question we're going to have to decide is, are we going to schedule a special board meeting in order to discuss this before we send it on up the chain, or do you guys want to just have me review it and sign it?
From my perspective, I would say that Tom did a wonderful job of providing us with the verbiage. If we were just to play that back and you were to draft the letter based on what he gave to us, then I'm comfortable with you just signing it and not having to go through a special meeting.
I would request also, as Keith mentioned, that I personally have no issues with the sites reservoir. I think saving water when there's a theoretical plethora is a good idea. So maybe stating that also, that we are supportive of the sites reservoir, I think could be valuable, so that there's no misconception of it being objective to the whole project and trying to halt this project's progress.
Just a question on that, because I don't understand, but Tom discussed levels that are appropriate for us to make sure that we keep in the Trinity River or in the reservoir rather. In stating that we are not opposed to the sites project, do we need to clarify what levels of water we're comfortable with? Does my question make sense?
I think that would be referenced by the North Coast Regional Basin Plan Temperature Objectives.
And I personally, I would go even one step farther and say I don't think that we should state whether we support or not the sites reservoir project, because we haven't discussed that as a board. I think that well,
I think in the past, right?
Possibly.
yeah, I don't know if we have. I don't know if this board has. We have had this discussion.
I think that the best thing to do would be to move forward saying, okay, we would like to maintain this basin plan temperature objectives, and if somebody would be willing to step up and volunteer to write that letter, then I would also ask that that be done quickly and then sent out to all the supervisors. And so if anybody has any issue with wording, they can let me know before I sign it. I am a little bit leery to sign stuff that nobody's had a chance to look over, so.
So Sam, if it's okay with you, I'll get together with Tom this evening. We'll put this.
Well, I don't think that you have to get her permission because.
Well, she's on the Fish and Game Commission.
The Fish and Game Commission works for you, Liam, you don't work for them. So if you're willing to draft that letter, that would be fine, and I think that I'm okay with signing the letter and sending it up as long as, if anybody has any issues, they let me know quickly.
And I could put a draft together and have it to Liam for him to incorporate his changes.
Yeah, I'll get both of them incorporated this afternoon, tomorrow. I'll get them to everybody,
We'll do that right
and
now.
we'll go from there.
Okay.
So Margaret, does that
Work for me.
go from Liam to you, to us, or what?
Likely it will
What's
go
the
from,
Brown Act?
this is, well, we're gonna do this on a staff level, so it's not a Brown Act. I'll draft it, provide it to Liam, Liam can make the changes he deems appropriate, he'll send it back to me, I'll confirm it, and then I will coordinate with Emma to have the chair review and sign it. I'm happy to send it out to all board members. If anyone has a problem with it, let me know, and then we'll agendize it for a special meeting.
Okay.
So you'll be getting the draft letter together.
I'll get a first draft of it together, provide it to you for your changes and comments.
Okay.
Then if you provide it back to me, Emma and I can coordinate getting it sent out.
Okay.
When do I expect to get it?
With that,
Tomorrow?
In probably about 2 hours.
That's fine.
okay, if, with that, we will need a motion to,
This is not a motion item, because
Okay.
it isn't specified, it's just direction to staff. So what I just ask is that if anyone has any concern regarding the proposal that's coming forward, speak now, and then we'll discuss it further. Does anyone have concern regarding the letter being sent on the staff level? With the board chair's
No.
signature? Okay, thank you.
all right,
Thank you very much.
thank
Tom,
you.
thank you.
And with that, we will move on to the consent calendar. These items include routine, non-controversial matters which will be acted on by the board by one roll call motion. If a member of the public has any questions or comments on an item on the consent calendar, they may provide them now. A member of the board or staff may request an item be pulled and considered separately. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda?
I'm seeing none in the room. I have no hands raised and no new chats.
Okay, we will close public comment. Do any board members or staff wish to pull any items?
2.2, please.
2.8, please.
And also, I'd like to pull 2.1.
2.1. All right. Any others?
With that, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Seeing no other discussion, motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Brown. Supervisor Brown, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Chairman Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, item 2.1.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There are just some minor corrections. In the backup, the resolutions, though it's changed to Chair Frazier as the signature, it still has Supervisor Brown as the chair and Supervisor Frazier as the vice chair. So we need to change that in the backup to put Supervisor Frazier as the chair and Supervisor Groves as the vice chair. So it's just a clerical error and needs to be corrected.
Does anybody have any further discussion on this item? I guess I have to open this to public comment also.
Yes.
Is there any public comment on item 2.1?
I see none in the room. I have no hands raised and no new chats.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move to adopt 2.1 with the necessary changes as prescribed by Dr. Coons.
I will second.
Seeing no further comments, motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Chairman Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Item 2.2, Supervisor Brown.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the Airport Advisory Commission representation by Matt Stevenson. I have yet to meet with him, but he has an extensive aviation history, and it's quite exciting to have someone with that enthusiasm take an elevated role in advocating for the airports. Sometimes the airports, I think, are overlooked. With this infrastructure bill theoretically coming down the line, the airports is an area where we can look into potential improvements. So I just want to share my excitement and enthusiasm. That's all.
Yeah, real nice resume, Jeremy. Good job.
And he's, I think they're in, he's in High-Palm or Hayfork?
High-Palm.
High-Palm.
I would take this opportunity to note to the CAO that we haven't had an airport advisory commission meeting, and I think Jill's been to one. And we were promised that the new person, forgetting her name, Kimmy, was going to get on top of that and get things done and get these meetings back into a cycle. So with the leaving of Mr. Tippett, and that would be something for the new director to get on top of again.
Right, with that, I will open public comment on item 2.2.
I see no comments from the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
I will move to approve 2.2 as presented and appoint Matt Stevenson to the commission.
I would second that.
Seeing no further comments, motion by Supervisor Brown, second by Supervisor Cox. Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Chairman Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, item 2.8, Supervisor Cox.
Yeah, I just have some questions and concern as to the amount of the bid. I just did a little bit of research. It seems excessive to my limited knowledge. And I also don't see whether or not this was put out to competitive bid, so I would like some clarity.
I just text Liz, I'm hoping she's on the line for the bid portion of it, otherwise I can explain the necessity of it. Is she out there?
Yes, I believe.
There she is.
Can you hear me? Good morning, Liz Hamilton, Director of Health and Human Services, Office of Emergency Services. And we utilize the existing contract that we have with the county for this project. And so I don't know if there's something more specific, Supervisor Cox, that I can help answer.
It looks like you're purchasing a generator and some, it's not top of mind without sliding down to it. I recall three components to what went into the total price.
I believe it's a 100,000 watt generator, a 400 amp breaker box, and a transfer switch.
Yeah, a little history on this was after the car fire, and we did our debriefing, one of the biggest issues we had during the car fire was we kept losing power. And when we lose power, our servers go down, so we have no communications through emails, anything like that. So one of the emphasis we put after that was we need to get a generator backup for our servers, so when, not if, when the next disaster hits and we lose power, we still have communications and we're still able to contact. We weren't able to, we were all using our personal cell phones and personal emails during that time because we couldn't use the county servers. So Ed did a good job in putting that as a priority, and this is going to come to fruition. We believe it should be live April 1st. So that's the background on how the necessity of it.
Correct, and I'd like to add that that was the item that was voted on through Disaster Council, as well as receiving part of the power safety, power shutoff funds
It's through grant monies.
through grant monies, correct?
I have no problem whatsoever with the need for this provision, but just that little bit of research I did, it just looks like the items are really expensive. Was this put out to competitive bid?
$100,000 is pretty typical for a 100,000 watt generator. If you look at the extra exhibits in there, it breaks it down. A new generator, it's usually $1 a watt or whatever.
But I think her question, and I'm sorry for putting words in your mouth, but your question was it put out to competitive bid? And Liz said no, that this was under our existing contract that we have with Jones Electric. Is that correct?
That's correct, and time was of the essence in this situation. We had a cutoff time by the state just to have this money fully expended.
So my understanding, and Liz can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the original bid with Jones Electric was done through a competitive bidding process. They were the lowest bidder during that process, and so all this is doing is adding additional services onto that original contract. Is that correct? Yes.
That is correct.
And that's annually also?
Fiscal.
No, this is a one-time purchase. The contract maintained by the county, CAO Pins would have to speak to that.
Sorry, what was the question?
Whether it was a one-time purchase?
Yes, a one-time purchase. Yeah, it's not an annual.
But
And the purchase is for the generator and the materials, and then there's an hourly rate, and then the allowance can go up to $250. It's not a $250,000 purchase.
Yeah, that's for the labor to install. Once it's installed, this contract it's not, we're not renewing it every year once it's installed. I mean, there may be maintenance on it over the next few years if there's any issues, but this contract is for the installation.
Okay, something in the backup data I read said annually, so that helps.
okay, so but to be clear, that also the question was, does the Jones overall electric contract come up annually?
Yes, and that's a smaller, I think it's only 15,000 or something like that. I can't remember what it was.
But that we competitively bid, so we chose
Yes.
Jones Electric for this fiscal year, and the next fiscal year there would be another competitive bid for work. Normal routine work, is that correct?
Correct.
Emma's,
I don't believe that we would have to go to bid every year because we have an existing contract. And Margaret, please jump in if I'm wrong.
No, you are correct. We would follow the public contracting code, which does allow you to renew contracts for a period of time. But yes, this will ultimately go out for public bid when that time expires. I agree with Emma, it's not a year. I have 3 years of jumping into my head, but I can double check that.
you don't have to do that for me, you may for other people, but I'm fine as long as I understand.
With that, we'll open item 2.8 to public comment.
We do have an electrical engineer in the room if somebody wanted to ask him a question.
Do we have any public comment?
I'm seeing none in the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Okay, with that, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move and approve 2.8 as presented.
I'll second.
Seeing no further comments, motion by Supervisor Brown, second by Chairman Frazier. Chairman Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all of the items that were pulled from consent.
Correct.
So, moving on to reports and announcements. Reports from department heads. Do we have any department heads that would like to report out?
Good morning, everybody. Chair Frazier, board members, members of the public. Lisa Lozier, Interim Director of Building and Planning. So I thought it'd been a while since we talked about our general plan update, so I would kind of give you a brief little report about where we're at with that project. Ultimately, last year, a lot of the things that we had hoped to accomplish in phase one, which was a kickoff meeting with the Board of Supervisors, jointly with Planning Commission, and some meetings for the community to come and enjoy. Those kind of got sidelined by the Monument Fire, McFarland Fire, COVID, kind of et cetera, et cetera. So I have been meeting with our general plan update consultants on a fairly regular basis. Last meeting we met January 6th and are going to try to reformat our phase one so we can get the kickoff meeting done, make the presentations to the board and planning commission, and have the community have an opportunity to meet these folks and give us some input. And while we're kind of working through all of that, we've also been working on phase two of the general plan update, which includes the initial updates to our zoning ordinance, so we will be consistent with state and federal laws that we are not currently consistent with. A number of those are in regard to housing regulations. Also, we do not have any regulations for telecommunications, which I think is super important right at the moment. And then there's a couple of other items as well that we'll be working on. They have provided me a draft of items that they would like to address, which I have sent back comments, and I expect that we will be moving forward on setting some meeting times, potentially schedule for a joint session with the board and planning commission to discuss some of those updates, and then we'll move forward with planning commission review and of course back to the board. Also underway and has been working in the background is a existing conditions report, which basically goes through all of the information on the general plan, our backup documents for general plan elements, backup documents for the zoning ordinance, GIS information that we have available, any information, tax information, information from any of our community service districts, that sort of thing, anything that would be relevant that we would want to include in the general plan. Staff members and myself have been collecting that information and sending it to the consultants, which they have been dispersing to their sub-consultants working on specific areas, and we're working on providing a document. So hopefully, if everything comes together a little bit better in 2022, we will be able to combine part of the elements of phase three and kind of roll some of that in with our kickoff meeting that we had planned to do originally and get this project back on track. So that's where we are currently, and I would be glad to ask questions if you have any.
Do you have any kind of a timeline yet on when you might be able to put that kickoff meeting?
You know, I don't, but I do have a meeting scheduled with the consultants on Thursday, so 2 days from today. And I'm hoping that we're going to start framing what that's going to look like. I know it will be important to let everyone know well in advance so we can make sure we have some smooth and well-planned meetings.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any other department heads that would like to report out? Any on Zoom?
I'm not seeing any movement.
Everything must be running smoothly in the county. CAO report.
I'm going to go ahead and defer my time to the cannabis ad hoc, because that'd be most of the stuff I've been working on lately, so I'll just go ahead and defer to that, and if they have any questions during that time, we'll be more than happy to answer or give my input.
Okay. reports from members of the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Brown?
Sure. No out-of-county travel, had a RCRC meeting, nothing vastly substantial to bring back. There's, we're still watching the Board of Forestry with the fire safe regulations. That's still being watched very closely by all the rural counties. Had an LPC meeting and got to hear some of the challenges from the perspective of other committee members, such as the ability to recruit or the lack of ability to recruit teachers into rural areas, and some of the roadblocks in that area. Also, there's a position open for the WIC, and it is a good job opportunity for working with schools, all the schools in the county, and there's a variety of educational outreach programs and information that person can relay to youth. Had a forest ad hoc meeting through RCRC. We got to talk with some of the U.S. Forest Service uppers in the region, talked about how they can kind of have better communications and engagement with their neighboring private landowners. They have a 10-year strategy that should be released within the next couple of weeks, and that outlines a lot of their projects and areas they're looking to improve in. There was a webinar for the Economic Resiliency Fund. It's going to be one of the largest investments into the state in a long time. I think that the funds come through SCED, through that Economic Development Center, I guess is what it is, or entity. So we're involved with that. I know Susie was on that webinar as well. It came up during one of the discussions, the Governor's Forest Task Force, and I know I've brought it up a couple of times. Trinity County's never really had representation on it. I've reached out to the fire safe councils or the fire chiefs councils to see if there was anyone interested in having that position. I think it's a monthly meeting. And what I was told was that a lot of people felt that it was redundant on a lot of other meetings going on. So I would like to be involved unless someone else would like to be involved. There's a lot of overlap between the Forest Task Force and RCRC, Golden State Finance, things like that. However, I don't have, I've got limited experience with forest health issues. And so if there's someone, Supervisor Chairman Frazier, you come to mind as if you would be interested in serving on that Forest Task Force. That I think it would be valuable to share realistic boots on the ground experiences. I think that's something that is missing from Sacramento. A lot of it is through logging association groups, supervisors, other environmental advocacy groups, I believe, serve on that task force, but I've really enjoyed trying to provide a practical boots on the ground, how policy affects the day-to-day life of someone who works in that industry or who lives around that industry. So maybe you want to think about if you'd be interested in that, and you and I can talk.
Yeah, we can discuss that.
It's not a formal committee that I think anyone needs to be appointed to. Margaret, maybe you can verify that, but I believe it, I don't know, it's a formal advisory committee, or it's technically a task force. So I'll send you some information and see if we need to formally have an action item on that. But I would like to get the seat filled. And that kind of leads me into my next thing of, with NACO. I'm going to engage in the NACO and start going to these NACO meetings. There's one in DC next month, there's one in Alaska in May, there's one in Colorado in March. And I would like the board to figure out what priorities you would like me to focus on. So, but when I'm there, I have a task at hand and not just going to all these meetings empty-handed. So, Keith, you probably have more way in this, but from my 3 years being on the board now, Seems like PILT is one of the big federal priorities. It's kind of repetitive, but it's still really important and needs to be advocated for. And after hearing the discussion on the Trinity River today, and that promise for that hearing, maybe that's something that would be worth putting time and effort into. That's something I would be interested in, trying to make someone abide to their promise. Otherwise, if there are other federal priority issues, I would like that to be kind of figured out before I go to these big conferences.
And would you like us to actually agendize that for discussion where we could do it in a public setting, or do you want to, or do you just want us to individually send you our suggestions?
No, we can't do that. So yeah, I'll build an agenda item before I leave in February, and I'll outline what I feel are federal priorities. If you have ones, then you would send those to Margaret, and then I'll work with Margaret to make sure that the agenda item's complete, representing all federal issues that we might want to address.
And that would mean you'll have that done by the first meeting in February?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Any meetings the 12th through the 16th?
Yes, in DC.
So February 1st, we will look forward to hearing from you and give our direction.
Okay, thank you. And that completes my report.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Gogan.
I have no out-of-county travel. Myself and Keith met with TRP, with Mike Dixon and Chad Abel a week or so ago, and we had a good meeting there. I think we finally put to rest the water winter variable flow plan for now. I'm going to try to help with some public outreach with Chad, doing some things in the evening, getting Trinity River Restoration Program a better identity with the public here would be a good thing, so I think we're going to pitch in on that. We did a Fish and Game Commission meeting a week or so ago. We have a new secretary. Emma Burrs is our new secretary, which is great. We needed one. Got Samantha off the hook for a lot of things, so thank you very much. At TMC monthly call the day after on the 13th, that went well, and that is about it for me.
All right, thank you. I attended a collaborative recreation meeting with the Trinity County Collaborative. A lot of information. That was the first one I'd attended, so it was almost overwhelming at times, but it was good. Besides that, I think all of my reporting out will come later in ad hoc reports. So, Supervisor Cox.
So an update on the Trinity Senior Nutrition Program being implemented by our PSA2 Executive Director Terry Gabriel and her staff. And there just have been some unfortunate delays in that, a couple of background checks that are still trying to come through. And also the nutrition program at Dignity Health Connected Living has been experiencing pandemic-related staff shortages. And then the holidays, they're still awaiting a signed agreement with the local entity that's going to do distribution for us. And so they are just saying sorry for the delays, asking for patience, and assuring us that everything is going to move forward. And I know they are very hardworking. I appreciate their efforts very much. I have no out-of-county travel to report. I do have upcoming meetings this week with Forest Supervisor Rachel Berkey on Thursday and our local district ranger Terry Jones on Friday, and also after a couple of failed attempts, finally an introductory meeting with Assemblyman Jim Wood on Friday as well. So looking forward to that. That is the end of my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Groves.
Yeah, so I met with the Forest Service on our monthly phone calls. Things of interest that hopefully by the end of the month, the Forest Service will have their analysis of what needs to be fixed after the fires. And so this would be miles of trails and, well, you can imagine all the hundreds of things that need to be done. They are worried that they won't have enough funding, that this may be a 3 to 4 year fix along these, especially for recreation, which I had pointed out to them that that was not the best scenario for Trinity County. But one of the good news is what they were, their planning teams, they've only had one planning team for Trinity County. Now they're going to have one in 6 Rivers and the S Trinity. So we will at least get things planned quicker and moving forward. And that can range from, again, trails to logging issues. We did, as Liam talked about, we met with Mike Dixon. We didn't come to an agreement, but on the winter flows. But what's happened is that the Hupa tribe has basically sued the BOR and on a bigger picture, and their play is to take over all river actions, restoration, and so the Bureau felt uncomfortable even talking about winter flows this year, and we'll look at it for next year. And also I had no out-of-county travel.
All right, thank you. And do you want to start us off on the report out from the cannabis ad hoc?
Why don't you start?
I don't know where to start. I guess I don't have my notes handy, but off the cuff, well, we did start out our ad hoc. We met with our new consultant for the ordinance writing, discussed issues that she had found, questions that she had concerning our ordinances and how we wanted her to proceed. That seemed like it moving along quicker than I had anticipated, so that was a good thing. We did have, I was trying to think of all the meetings we had on Thursday. We met with our general meeting. We did have some public engagement there. Then we had our private meeting with the cannabis consultants afterward. I think, personally, I believe that we are moving forward and that the cannabis ad hoc has been a benefit. So I did hear some concerns that we're not being transparent. We do schedule private meetings, so people who are worried about transparency, we do have our first portion of our ad hoc is the ad hoc meets, and we go over what's happened in the past week or what we are trying to accomplish. Then we have a public meeting, which we send that information out to the public, basically, where we say, this is what's happened, this is what we're planning on doing. And then we also schedule times when we'll meet with people privately, because after our initial meeting, there's two sides to this story, and people are not comfortable talking altogether. So if you are a stakeholder and would like to schedule a public meeting, you can reach out to Supervisor Groves or myself, and we will try to make that happen. I'm sure you have something to add, Supervisor Groves.
Yeah, I want to, I was very impressed with our meeting with our ordinance writing consultant. Thank you, Margaret, for finding her. She has a lot of questions and a lot of interesting concepts that we hadn't discussed before. And so the nice thing about her walking in, she has a very fresh view and not stuck in all the same way that we've thought about things for a long time. And so I think that's going to be a great benefit. Again, the Rush Creek opt-out and the retail ordinance are top for her working on. Also, through our other meetings, we realized when we first talked to her, we overlooked the processing license. So the processing license has been moved into the top tier of things to look at. We are meeting our other ad hoc with the cannabis grower group was pretty successful, mainly because David and Richard were there, and so they could answer technical questions that me and Dan usually aren't able to answer. So that was, I want to thank them for being there and answering those questions. And then this meeting coming up Thursday, it's going to be a little different schedule. We have a private meeting at our noon time with opt-out groups. And then at 1 o'clock, we're having, is that still on?
It is, yes.
Okay, so 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and may probably go longer, is the consultants here to deal directly with, and this is an open meeting, but mainly what we've seen in the past is cannabis consultants and growers asking technical questions of our consulting staffs and getting that moving forward. I know there's a great deal of frustration out there, but I'm as positive as I've been in a long time that we have actually finally built a foundation to start this process going, and it seems to be moving that way. So that's it. I think I covered it.
All right, do you have anything to add?
I can just add, and I think the numbers are still the same, I haven't heard any different. But to date, we've received just below 110, about 108, about 108 Appendix Cs. And they've all been submitted to the consultants, so they're not sitting in our venue. They're with the consultants that are being reviewed as we speak. We hired 2 consultants with the anticipation we're going to receive between 300 to 500 Appendix Cs, so those are coming slower than we anticipated, which is great for us, because then we can get the results out quicker. But we are anticipating that once they start coming through, we start issuing some licenses, we'll probably get flooded with quite a few more Appendix Cs. I think they may be waiting to see how fast the process is, but they are moving forward. David's doing a great job keeping the flow moving, keeping the consultants informed of what's going on. They're keeping us informed. As Keith said, it's one of the few times in this program that we feel optimistic. So,
and I guess I would like, there has been questions on the state license, because the state licensing is an important part of this. And Margaret, do you want to go? Margaret had meetings with the state to clarify what it meant to be in the, what do we call it, the CEQA in process. And so what that means and what people have to do to keep their state license valid.
I'm happy to kind of briefly talk about our discussions with the state. It was less a technical but more of a procedural issue. When a state license is filed, they have 2 different divisions that analyze it. The first one is the division that reaches out to the county and asks us if they are compliant with our local regulations, and that includes us providing information about whether they have a license or they're in process. And if they're in process, of course, they have their Appendix C filed, and we're working through that process, or whether they do not have anything in process. So we replied directly to the state on those. There's another branch that does their state environmental review, and what was happening is the 2 divisions within the state weren't communicating with each other regarding when we said a process was going forward. They had not completed it, but it was going forward. So we were able to work out a way to provide the environmental review for the state, a list of everyone who has their Appendix C in or has a license in, so that won't be a hang-up anymore. We're going to just deal with them separately as opposed to having the streamline, which we originally had hoped. But we had a good conversation with them, and we were able to find a workaround and have set up further meetings, more regular meetings, to make sure that they understand exactly what's going on, and they don't have any other anything else that falls through the cracks from the state's level. But we have that set up more frequently now.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I know that you said that the retail ordinance was top.
Yeah.
And I know Richard had a meeting with one of the people who were looking to open one. Do we have some date that this may happen? I know they're under financial constraints, we'll say.
We do not have a date at this time. It will be next Thursday, I believe, when we meet with Heidi again, and at that point, I think we'll get timetables of things. I mean, I have thrown out, just pulled out of the air that these should be, that one should be in front of the commission in like maybe the end of March or something.
So part of what the consultant is doing is putting together a plan with deliverable dates and times. So the first meeting, she was just getting to understand what what the priorities of the board was, what staff's priorities was as well in terms of where we think we need assistance. Then she's going to take that information and put an actual work plan together. Once that's done, we can bring that back to the board and make that public so folks can understand kind of the process that we're just going through.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the ad hoc? All right. Moving on to limited density rural dwellings ad hoc. We have had some movement in this area. I know I spoke with Director Lozier, who had an opportunity to preview what we had drafted and passed along some concerns from the Department of Environmental Health and Building. So those are things that we'll be addressing shortly. Myself and Liam and Margaret will be having a meeting on Thursday after all the other ad hoc meetings. So that'll be an evening meeting, and hopefully to determine how to move forward with this and either get this, just try to get this buttoned up and get it rolling so we don't have another ad hoc but actually have a finished product. So are making progress, and hopefully we'll make more progress in the near future. Good enough?
Good enough.
All right.
Dan,
Yes.
I did forget a section that it's probably important to the board, especially when it comes to taxes, since we only have between 7 and 10 licensed cannabis, that our ordinance does not allow us to accept taxes on non-licensed growers. So due to the lawsuit and the state and the ruling that you have to have CEQA, that we don't have any ability to collect those taxes or right to collect. Margaret was going to write a paper on that, or if you haven't. Also, there is part of the taxes in the past was based on a tiering system, and there was going to be an analysis of that. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot that you need an answer, but I want people to know that that tax revenue after the lawsuit has gone away, and also the licensing fees has gone away. So thank goodness for this $3.2 million.
And again, as part of an update, we did have a meeting with the CAO and tax collector on Friday regarding this issue. So we're looking into a couple more issues and developing a plan to go forward. On the tiering issue, I have prepared a legal memo which has been provided to the CAO and the tax collector on that issue. So that's completed.
All right. Thank you. County matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request an item be heard out of order. Does anybody have any request to hear anything out of order? I'm seeing none. Board of Supervisors, item 4.1, discuss and/or select the desired avenue to form a community choice aggregate in Trinity County. And Supervisor Brown.
Yep. All right, thank you. So we kind of discussed this lightly about a month ago, I believe. And so I refined this pretty much to the 3 available options moving forward if that is desired. So this is kind of a 2-part maybe of 1, do we want to proceed with this? And 2, which option do we proceed by? So I don't know if everyone had a chance to look through the backup material and the discussion, but kind of I gave a legal background of the the community choice aggregate concept in general, and then talked about the three options. The one option is working directly with TPUD through a joint powers agreement, and I think Paul discussed this pretty thoroughly last time he was here presenting on this item. The second option would be forming an existing CCA outside of the county, such as the Redwood Coast Authority, and that's essentially done with a similar JPA and maybe an MOU as well. And then the third option would be if Trinity County had interest in forming its own entity and running a CCA as its own county enterprise. I outlined some of the pros and cons. And the biggest thing comes down to county capacity. Does the county actually have capacity to run an entity of this sort? And from my inquiries, it doesn't seem to be that way. And it also seems it would be obviously make the most sense to work with our local power provider, TPUD. So I wanted to kind of make sure everyone was aware of the options and the reasons why or why we wouldn't approach each avenue, and then maybe Emma, you can pull up the little item there, attachment. So this is the reference guide. Do you mind scrolling down to the bottom where the flow chart is? And so, yeah. So the whole concept of the CCA is a very timely matter. The first step is the formation of an ordinance approving the formation of the CCA entity, and then along that comes with the JPA with the desired entity. After you do those initial steps, typically then you receive the data. We've already received the data. We, being essentially me and Richard, have the data, or the county I should say has the data. And so the whole process can be done in 2 years or less. There's actually exemption waivers where if you have certain types of momentum with the project, you can start offering power to customers sooner than the formal 2-year approval timeline. Can you mind scrolling down to the lower one? I'm not going to go over every single detail. A lot of it is really technical stuff, and Paul's probably going to be a better resource for the technical stuff. So I'll go back to the original question. The phase one is the county interested in the formation of an ordinance to support this process? I guess I'd kind of leave it at that for now, and then I don't know if the supervisors have additional technical questions on the process. We can entertain those now, and then go into public comment and all of that.
Does anyone have any technical questions on the formation of a CCA?
Jeremy, I just have one. Are you saying that for the county to form and operate this as its own enterprise is the more labor-intensive option, and that doing the JPA directly with PUD would be less labor-intensive for us if they were willing?
Correct.
Yeah. And is it appropriate to ask the general manager of PUD, since he's present, whether or not he would be willing to entertain that option?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he spoke to that last time when he presented, but yeah, Paul, feel free to comment as you'd like.
So one, I'm excited that you're seriously considering this, and at our board meeting last Thursday, my board expressed real support in doing what we can to make this successful for the county. So looking, I'll agree with your statement that joining an existing CCA is problematic for a Trinity County CCA, but if you plan to serve Trinity River hydropower, first preference power, because by federal law that can only be delivered to the citizens of Trinity County. So whether it be Red Coast or some other CCA, they would essentially be administering a separate and distinct power supply contract. The JPA option, I think, works great, and I believe that my board very much will support forming a JPA. To just throw out the third option that you had there, to talk about that a little bit, I understand the capacity issue. I think you could overcome that by having a contract to administer the CCA, and maybe, you know, I guess there's some pros and cons. It might be more of a legal issue, whether you prefer JPA or if the county forms its own CCA. That third option, where the county forms its own, does give you more control. I do think the PUD is a very likely partner to administer that contract for you, but it would open up in the future, or make it easier in the future, I guess, for the county to ultimately take on that responsibility if you chose to. Now, you may look at that now and say, we don't think we'd ever do that. There are other entities besides Trinity PUD. I agree, we're the most likely. We are the only entity in California administering a first preference right to Trinity hydropower, and it is separate and distinct. We're the only ones that do it with the federal government, but there are some folks that do something similar. The City of Redding provides power supply services for City of Shasta Lake. They have a base resource contract, which is different than our first preference contract with the Western Area Power Administration, but very similar. Whether Redding would agree to do something like this under contract, I don't know. The Northern California Power Agency would be another option. I'm not trying to over-confuse the issue, just kind of lay out what I think are your options. I think forming the JPA is an excellent option, but also think if the county wanted to take it on its own and then look at a contract with another entity to help manage that community choice aggregation district, I think that's also feasible. Those two, to me, it's kind of more form than substance, though there's some real nuance to those. So, I mean, if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to. One thing you're going to have to realize, just like us, you're going to have to change power rates potentially every year, because that's the thing about first preference Trinity Power is when it rains a lot, the cost that you will be charged, and therefore the cost you can charge your customers, will go down, and the reverse is true. I mean, we do that on an annual basis now. I would imagine that interaction would be pretty easy since we're right here and we're doing it on a regular basis. It would be a little different if you contracted with another entity. Not that it's that complicated and they couldn't do it for you, but little things to think about in terms of how this goes forward. But my board's enthusiastic about helping the county deliver Trinity River hydropower to everybody in the county. We'd love to see it happen.
Yeah, and to just expand a little bit on that, you know, the benefits of the county having their own, and as Paul said, having a little more control, is there is a revenue stream. There are, you know, there's not profits, but there's programs. So you can create jobs, you can have county programs. One of the attachments I included was benefits of the CCA, and that kind of outlines the specific benefits that an entity could have control of. But in looking into the present, it doesn't seem too feasible. I like you bringing up maybe down the line, it's something where the county could consider that.
In the beginning, you won't be well capitalized. It's a capital intensive business. You know, we have a drought relief surcharge, but you'll have those years where maybe it's a slight drought, and if you have enough money in the bank, you can sell at a slight loss, if you will, and not have to raise rates. But the ability to do that kind of smoothing in the beginning is going to be extremely limited because you're just not going to have the capital. But over time, as you grow some reserve fund associated with this, it opens the door to doing those things.
Thanks, Paul.
So in every one of these scenarios, Paul, the customer still has the right to choose PG&E over?
That's up to the county. So you can make that a feature of the community choice aggregation district you form. You know, another thing, I've made some guesstimates over the years of what kind of revenue. I'm like, if I'm just, you know, ballparking it, I'm guessing a Trinity County CCA for the areas we don't serve would be equivalent to about 10% of our size. But I don't know that because I'm not able to look at the data yet. The reason I'm bringing this up is, you know, well, one, it's hard to imagine. Let's suppose you can do a 20 or 25% reduction in cost for folks. I can't imagine them not signing up for that, right? The reliability stays, everything stays the same basically, except the price goes down 20 or 25%. But economies of scale matter in terms of administrative costs. And it's something to consider in terms, I get the politics are really good about making it voluntary, but if you formed a CCA and let's say only half the people showed up, your administrative costs probably aren't any lower to administer that for half the folks that it is for all the folks. So it's just something you need to think about. Not having had the benefit of really looking at real data, it's hard for me to offer you advice on that at this point, because I just don't know the potential revenue stream of a Trinity County CCA yet.
Any more technical questions? All right, with that, we'll open up the public comment on item 4.1. Do we have any public comment?
I see none in the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
That's actually kind of surprising.
It is, I'll never.
The only thing I'd like to add is that customers are automatically enrolled. They're notified twice within 60 days of the formation. They're automatically enrolled and they can opt out if they choose to do so.
Okay, so getting back to what we're...
So Jeremy, you're recommending the JPA
Yes, I'm recommending,
versus us farming and then contracting that out at this time.
correct.
Are you putting a time period on the JPA, or is that a thing?
It's all open for discussion. You know, this is all new territory, I think, for most of us. So I have an example of other JPAs in the backup file. I didn't look over it thoroughly to see if they had timelines. Margaret, is there an industry standard for JPA timelines and expiration dates and stuff?
No, typically a JPA is formed until it's dissolved, especially if they're taking on a project of this nature. I would assume you'd want it to maintain its integrity throughout the delivery of services. So I wouldn't recommend looking at having it an end date, but we can look at having options of transitioning to the county if the county were able to be properly staffed to handle it. We can look at that as an option.
Well, in full disclosure, when I was president of the TPUT board, we looked at this, and at that time the concept would have been that the county form, and then there really wasn't county, besides the CAO signing a contract and over to that, there really was no manpower needed between council and the CAO. So, but I'm willing to go on with the JPA. It's long since overdue that the people of Trinity actually get full benefit from Trinity River power, and then once we jump this hurdle, we can start looking at the 27% of the county that lives off the grid.
Only 27%.
Could be higher.
Well, no, that's 3,000 people in
Right.
the river.
That's where I get there, but yeah.
So, next question would be, how do we want to move forward with this? Do we want to make a motion to move forward looking into a JPA? Do we want to have separate motions where we say, okay, we think that this is something we should look into?
I'm happy to jump in and answer that. So the first thing, again, I think the board needs to come to consensus on is if you want to do it. If the answer is yes, and looking at the structural formation, if you would like to do it in the form of a JPA, then you would be giving direction or appointing negotiators to start negotiating the terms and conditions of the JPA. That has to be formally created. It's a document that we'd have to not only have the board agree to, but we would have to have PUD or whoever else we're going to look at forming the JPA with agree on it. Once that's done, they can start working on developing a plan, a business plan about how they're going to move forward on it, which is a requirement in order to submit to the state to get that done. And then it would come back again for a resolution through the board to approve everything that had been done through this process. So again, today I think we're looking for consensus on moving forward on this and what's the structure, and then who you would like to start working on the details of either the JPA or forming as a county entity.
Okay. So, the first order of business would be a motion whether or not we want to move forward with this.
I move to
consensus?
approve
Do we
the,
have to, do we need a formal motion, or can we just ask if people are opposed? Because all we need is consensus.
So today we have nothing that's formally to approve. We don't have the JPA contract, we don't have the resolution. So it can be done by consensus, or it can be done by motion. It's your pleasure how you want it. If you want it to be more formalized, we can absolutely do it by motion. But again, I think that has to, if you're gonna do it by motion, make sure it encompasses all three questions. You want a form, what's the form you want it to be in, and who you want to be in charge of pursuing that.
well, the first thing is the formation of the ordinance. The ordinance has to be formed to support a CCA. And then, once that is done, then we would do, I believe, the JPA.
So what we
I
need
think
to,
I may see it as the other way. I think the JPA has to form before it can then bring forward what it's going to bring forward to be approved.
Okay.
well, I think you're talking JPA and he was still talking CCA. So we
Yes.
need an ordinance that says we would like to form a CCA.
That's my understanding.
Before we move forward. So I think the consensus we would have to come up with was forming that ordinance that says we want to have a CCA in Trinity County. And then once we decide that we want a CCA in Trinity County, then we decide whether we want a JPA or if we're going to take it over as a county entity.
We can do it that way. Again, if you look at the samples of the ordinances approving it, they are all, that are in the backup, they're all having the JPA bring that question to the board. But again,
Okay.
we can look at it however you want to.
Okay. But it does sound like we have consensus that we want to move forward with this. I haven't heard any objection.
Yes, please.
So we're going to move forward with this. So I'm trying to get back to my backup information here.
And I imagine there'll be some back and forth between TPD and county, so. The timeline is important. Once everything is prepared and arranged and theoretically approved, you can get the JPA and the ordinance, and then the statement of notification goes in, I believe, along with implementation plan. And once those 4 items are in, they go in for review, they confirm review, and then it comes back, and then you can submit your business plan after that. After your business plan is submitted, you can apply for a waiver to start issuing the power and the service, or if they deny you that waiver, then after their formal review of your business plan, then they approve the service to begin. That's my understanding from looking over the stuff.
I agree.
I would have a question for the board. Is this something that we try to put off on county council to come up with all these ordinances in JPA, or is this something that we should appoint Chairman Brown and another supervisor as an ad hoc to start drafting ordinances and look into forming a JPA? And at the point we move forward, we could appoint the ad hoc as our negotiators. If you guys think that would be a beneficial way to move forward with this.
My view is to have council do this work, and of course Jeremy's taking the lead in this, so, you know, consultation with Jeremy. But most of this stuff has like a form, a legal format that the steps are going.
Yeah.
And then I like the idea of having, once we're negotiating with TIPA, to have 2 members. And that would make sense that Jeremy and you would that, because it's your district, your districts. But that's just my recommendation.
I don't know if I would want to be involved with that, even though it is my district. Right now, I'm almost meetinged out, but.
Well, that's up to you. You wield the gavel, so you know what you want.
So, I am looking for a logical way to move forward with this, where we can actually be getting something done. I know it's going to be difficult to if we have to keep bringing this back to the board over and over for multiple tweaks and stuff, that's going to make a long process.
So I just asked that maybe Margaret and I can talk offline, and then we would come back to the board with the draft ordinance and theoretically a draft JPA. And that would be, in my opinion, the next best steps. Margaret and I can confer with TPD on the drafting of that, and then we would come back to the board for formal approval of those details.
Okay, and then I have no problem with that. The other question I would have before we go that far is, do we have consensus on the JPA, or do we think that we should move forward as the board creating a Trinity County entity to deal with this?
I don't feel like we have capacity for that. I think the JPA is the way to go. That is fine, at least.
That's fine.
Okay, so, all right, we don't need a formal vote. We've given direction to county council and Jeremy to move forward with this. Is that good enough? Or
That's good enough. Let me just make sure I understand the direction so there's no confusion. So the board is asking us to move forward on this, looking at doing it in the form of a JPA. Ask council to prepare all the documents to move forward on it in conjunction with Supervisor Brown, who will have the ability to act as a quasi ad hoc in terms of going back and forth on issues, but all things need to be brought to the board for final approval. The only question I had is in the discussions with the PUD regarding the formation and the content of the JPA, does Jeremy have the capacity to negotiate on behalf of the county?
I would rather we had two supervisors to negotiate, and I was thinking I would be, let's ask Supervisor Cox to be involved with that, because I think the rest of us are already doing ad hoc, so.
Or Gross, because he had started to do this years and years ago, so.
Yeah, and I'm open to suggestions if Supervisor Groves would like to do that. I know that he's already got ad hoc commitments to deal with, so that's why I was suggesting Supervisor Cox, but because you do have prior experience, if you're interested, I'm open to that too.
I would leave it to Supervisor Cox if she has interest in following this up. I'm not sure if she does because it's not in her district, but if not, I would be willing. I have a lot of experience with CPUD in this process. So.
I'm happy to go either direction.
Okay, well then.
He has more
So bring the coin out.
When it comes time for negotiation, there'll be Supervisors Brown and Cox and County Council.
Thank you.
All right. Do we need anything else on item 4.1?
No, thank you.
All right. Clerk of the Board, item 4.2, pursuant to Trinity County fee waiver policy, findings of Weaverville/Douglas City Parks and Recreation. Aquatic support shed provides a benefit to the county that this project is not for the purpose of fundraising, and approve WDCPR's application for waiver of county fees, waiving building department fees in the amount of $1,065.74. Potential loss of revenue in the amount of $1,065.74 to the building department. And
My name's on it. I don't know if it's on or not, but because it's the clerk of the board, my name's on it. But essentially, exactly what you just said, we're asking for a fee waiver. This is a standard thing we do when we're dealing with municipalities between county and districts. So we're just asking the board to waive this fee. That would. Is Veronica on? Okay, I'll let her do a little background.
do any supervisors have any technical questions for either CAO Brown or Veronica Albies, who's the Park and Rec representative? All right,
And here.
We have no technical questions, so we will open this to public comment.
I have none from the room. I see no raised hands and no new chats.
Okay, no public comment. We'll bring it back to the board. Anyone care to make a motion?
I would move to adopt 4.2 as presented.
Seeing no further comments, motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Chairman Fraser.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Human Resources, item 4.3. Modify the departmental allocation list for the sheriff's office to read 1, administrative coordinator 1 or 2, effective January 18th, 2022. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for an administrative coordinator 1 at A step is $6,051, and for an administrative coordinator 2 at A step is $6,587. Go ahead, Shelley.
Good morning, Shelley Nelson, HR Director. So the Sheriff's Office is requesting to modify the allocation list by adding one allocation for Administrative Coordinator 1-2. The current ratio of administrative support personnel to employees within the Sheriff's Office is approximately 1 to 31. The current administrative staff consists of a business manager and an administrative services officer. The ratio among other departments range from 1 to 3 to 1 to 10. For comparison, over the past 7 years, the number of contracts managed by the Sheriff's Department has increased from 4 to over 100, and this is anticipated to increase with the opening of the new detention facility. The new facility will have 19 additional beds that will increase accounts payable duties and staffing levels, adding to staff time. Additionally, the ongoing fires that this county experiences have consistently added to the workload with an increase in expense tracking and special funding source billing. And the sheriff's presented a compelling need to funding allocation of an administrative coordinator 1-2 to assist with the increased workload at the budget hearing in past September. At that time, the board directed the CAO to make funding the position a priority as soon as revenue source was identified. The CAO has informed the sheriff that funds have been identified, and thus we are here requesting the additional allocation.
Do you have any technical questions for Shelley before we open public comment? All right.
Do I know what that revenue source was?
I'll defer to Richard.
That's a good question. Because that has changed a little bit. Part of the negotiations was to utilize the cannabis tax, and we have collected enough that would completely fill this this year and more actually, and then we anticipated it going on. So for a short time, this revenue is suspended, even though we've collected enough to complete the rest of this year and the salary savings they have in their department that would still cover it. But it could be an issue ongoing years if we don't resolve the issue with the cannabis tax. Now, I anticipate we will, but currently we're suspending the collection of cannabis tax.
And
so this was new information. We just found out on Friday.
to be clear, when we say this year, we don't mean 2022. We mean January through June, correct?
Yes, well,
Fiscal year.
this fiscal year, yeah, so it'll end in June of, so it's funded this year through June 30.
And so what are the ramifications I think we have to consider? We hire somebody for 6 months and then we can't support their position anymore, then what? Not only to that individual, but also to a sheriff's department that has adjusted to some help and then loses it, or perhaps spends all that time, or the majority of it, or a good share of it, training somebody to be ready to take things over and then.
All valid points. Those are the issues we have to weigh with this information we just received.
I'd be curious how the sheriff feels about it. Does he feel like that's a risk worth taking, or does he feel like that might be a little bit maybe demoralizing to the work environment?
Well, I can't speak for the sheriff. I don't know if he is online. He's on.
I am here if you'd like to hear my views on this.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Board, and my staff is here as well. You can see the faces on my staff as for the last few years. They have been working diligently to cover the increase in workloads, working many extra hours, weekends, holidays, to do this task that I've asked them to do and the previous administration have asked them to do. And I think it's basically come to the breaking point. To ask them to do the work of 4 or 5 people that other departments and other people within this county have been doing for so many years, I think it's come to the point where I can no longer ask them to do this in good conscience. We need additional staff. We need to find a funding source for this. At some point in time, I'm going to burn out these people. They're on the verge of that right now. I can only ask. It's up to you folks to figure out how the money coming in is going to be spent. But I can tell you this: if we're unable to find the funding to provide additional staffing, at some point in time, I'm going to be losing people. And the amount of expertise that my staff right now has to try and replace them, to try and train new people, it's impossible. So, you talk about getting somebody hired and trained in these positions right now. Recruitment, training, we'd be lucky to get somebody by April right now into this position. So you're talking April, May, June for funding this fiscal year. Hopefully in between now and then, there'll be a way to perhaps get another public safety tax on the ballot to increase some funding for our department. But obviously you do have to look at the money aspect of it. But we're in dire straits here with our department. We're getting further and further behind. I had to reach out to the Director of Health and Human Services for some assistance to get us caught up on fire billing from last summer. Simply because the amount of work that's been going on, we've not been able to accomplish that task. And anyway, that's about all I can tell you is that we're in dire straits. We need some help here.
Thank you. Any other technical questions?
Yeah, I have one question. Would the uncertainty of the taxation, cannabis taxation, and I guess some of the permitting, would code enforcement dollars go into this, helping fund this?
Code enforcement, and correct me if I'm wrong, code enforcement is billed as they go. So we don't give the Sheriff's Department X amount of dollars and then they spend it. They bill the general fund for code enforcement. So if code enforcement isn't working, they're really not recognizing the savings because they're not recognizing the billable hours. I'm going to make sure, if Susie's online, just make sure I'm correct with that. But if code enforcement is not going out and billing code enforcement hours, the Sheriff's Department's not receiving funding for that. So there's no savings in there.
Also, the code enforcement dollars, which comes out of cannabis, is limited to work within the parameters of that money. The fee is not just willy-nilly allowed to go wherever we want it to go.
Yeah, if code enforcement's not doing code enforcement, they're doing other jobs that a sworn deputy would be doing. They wouldn't be pulled into the office.
If I may, just to be clear, code enforcement funding is already paying for a records tech position, which is assisting with the administrative duties with the code enforcement unit.
Right. No more technical questions. We can open up to public comment. Do we have any?
I see none in the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
All right. So we'll bring it back to the board.
I'll move to accept 4.3 as presented.
I'll second.
Seeing no further comments, motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Brown. Supervisor Brown, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Chairman Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Transportation, item 4.4. Authorize the Director of Transportation to waive the cost of encroachment permits for property owners impacted by disasters declared as local emergencies in 2021 for tree removal within road right-of-ways. Unknown fiscal impact.
Good morning, Chair, Supervisors. David Colbeck, Interim Deputy Director for the Department of Transportation. This is a fairly simple item, which is great, short. I didn't need to speak to it for very long. I feel it's fairly self-explanatory. I want to highlight that this is modeled off of something that was passed in January of last year, I believe, for the August fire specifically. This is written to encompass pretty much all local disasters that are related to tree removal in the county right-of-way on private parcels. So it's meant to be inclusive and expansive of the issues that we're seeing downriver with the last December storm, I believe, as well as other fire events over this past year. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any technical questions for Mr. Colbeck? All right, no technical questions. We'll open the public comment.
I see none from the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Anyone care to make a motion?
I will move to adopt 4.4 as presented.
I will second.
Seeing no further comments, motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Chairman Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Treasurer Tax Collector, item 4.5. Approve an agreement with RT Lawrence to provide payment remittance processing services. $32,500 one-time cost and $3,300 per year from the Treasurer Tax Collector budget.
Good morning, Terry McBrayer, Treasurer Tax Collector. The item that you have before you is a compromise, more or less. We were also in the state of how the sheriff is as well, where we're in dire straits. This is, we've run into problems with recruiting and whatnot as far as just their applicants just are not coming in. But this particular software serves several purposes for us. So it will image, it'll scan, it'll prepare batches that we're able to send to the bank. And so this is something that we have to do anyway, but it'll also now, it's more streamlined in that, so if you send a check to us, it'll update will be attached to your record in our system for property tax. And so property disputes are something that we often receive a lot of requests for, as far as who paid and how did they pay, or simple things like that. But those are time consuming, and so this is going to create quite a few efficiencies for our office. Do you all have any particular questions on this?
Do you have any technical questions?
So the allotment that we gave you, or do you have any open allotments?
For employees?
Yeah.
I do, but we opted to do this instead of, I was saying we were looking at, I wanted to do a part-time person and this, but this was the compromise, was this is what I was given, so was to be able to do this. So technically, yes, I do have allocations that are open and not filled.
Okay, thank you.
So
The allocation that was provided, I think, a year ago, did that one get filled? And then you have others that are all?
I have another person that's going to be leaving.
The person that was hired after that allocation of last January came and is leaving?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Any other technical questions? All right, we'll open this to public comment.
I see none in the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
Okay. Going back to the board.
I'll move to approve the item as presented.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Seeing none, motion by Supervisor Brown, second by Supervisor Cox. Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Chairman Frazier.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. I believe that concludes our business except for closed session. So
You do have to take public comment.
do we have any public comment on our closed session items 5.1 and 5.2? I'll read the item 5.1, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation number cases 2, Ortiz versus the County of Trinity, case number 2221 CV 2248 JAM DMC, and Trinity Action Association Incorporated versus County of Trinity et al. Trinity County Superior Court Case number 19CB001. Do we have any public comment on agenda item 5.1?
I see none in the room. I have no raised hands and no chats.
I'd like to state for the record I'll be recusing from Trinity Action Association, Inc. First Trinity County item.
All right, thank you. And item 5.2, Government Code Section 54954.5E, Public Employee Evaluation, County Administrative Officer. Do we have any public comment on item 5.2?
I see none in the room. I have no raised hands and no new chats.
All right. We are adjourned.
Emma,
Yes.
now, somebody told me that our ad hocs can't be Zoomed.
They can't join or you can't legally do it?
No,
Oh, sign this for me, please.
that you would send a note saying that that was for staff members only.
I didn't mean to. I don't recall sending that,
Okay,
but I
so our
can.
Zoom, people can still Zoom in our meetings.
That's up to you guys. I'm not in charge.
Until after we're done with our initial meeting.
Right, no.
And then I kick them out if they're not invited to the private meetings too. So, yeah, but I give
There's no
everybody-
change in what we do.
No.
I have told people I don't have information on it.
Perfect.
That I don't know what
Let
I'm
them yell at
doing.
me, because I'm the most terrible,
You're our tech expert.
I'm the most terrible tech guy ever. I only did half the meeting on mute the other day.
That's awesome, actually. That's nice, Shelley.
Do we have a sign-in sheet?
Yes, I forgot to bring it. It's on the printer. I need to get it to you.
So Margaret, you're gonna get back to me today with the site thing?
Check your email, I got it to
Oh,
you 2 hours
I just
ago.
got something from Tom saying that he's gonna chip in some
No,